Hey! Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to Wildlands, and this week we're not going to have a long, drawn-out intro because, as you've probably noticed by the video's length, we're already doing it a little bit long. On screen here you can see last week's final result, which was our wonderful gharial habitat that we replaced in our entryway with. Really love how that turned out. It's very zoo-like, and that's what I was aiming for from the start. As you can probably tell from the cinematics on screen, we've not yet got round to doing any of the custom signs. They're coming. I will get them done ready for season 2, but they're not in this episode as I'm lazy, clearly. What we are going to do, however, is we are going to focus on the remaining 2 beginning areas from the very start of Wildlands all those months ago. I want to recreate our insect walkthrough and then repurpose our reptile house that has lain dormant and empty for many an episode into a wonderful tropical butterfly house. I'm so glad you're joining me for this, so let's jump on in. Okay, so today's episode is going to move a little bit fast, purely because there's just so much to get through. I had one of those instances where I just started building and then looked up and it was 3 days later. So I make no apologies, it is what it is, but we are where we are. Starting us off, however, I have gone through and removed a lot of what was already in the park, and I'm going to knock together a quick pavement. We're going to replace our previous brick pavement. I just felt the plaster pieces were a little bit too clean. And these limestone squares are wonderful for texture. So I've got that nice and prepared, and then we're going to go in and just delete that entire plaza that we created all those episodes previous, and then we're going to make a start on our insect house to begin with. Now there's a bit of a running theme that we're going to go through without this episode, and that is largely that I would heavily recommend, if you ever get in a similar position to where I am, where you decide you want to completely destroy what you've already built and start over, just delete the lot. As you can see here, I lifted the roof and then went to work deleting various bits. However, if I had just deleted everything, it would have probably been quicker to just rebuild the roof later on. That said, however, as you can see, we have got a nice lineup of our exhibits already set up and ready. I kind of wanted this room to become something a little bit more realistic, and we're going to do that by making a bit of a tighter closed-in space, but at the same time make it feel nice and welcoming and, ooh, I want to go have a look what's in there. Now for the floor, I had a bit of an idea. I wanted to use the dry stone texture, as you can see here, but I also wanted to see if we could get these brass reliefs to look like they've been carved into the floor. And I think we actually did a really good sort of effect with that. So after a little tryout, we are ready to start plopping down our floor. I'm going to just do this the same way you do anything like this. Just make a nice big one and repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. With that done, and a little bit of a shuffle around of some of the exhibits, I got all of our animals that have been unfortunately ripped from their home and popped them back into their responding exhibits. Now we're trying to keep a little bit of a theme here. So in the middle and to one side, we're going to keep to the desert animals, and then around the outer edge, we're going to keep to the more forest and jungle animals so that we can theme them up, as you'll see later, with a bit of lighting. Now while I've used the 3D facades for the inside of the exhibits, I'm also going to make some custom back panels, and we're going to use the plant panels for that, and then we're just going to use the faux rocks to create some ledges and areas that the animals can climb on. These being exhibits, unfortunately the animations are not compatible with them, so we never really will see an animal climbing on these, but I just think they add a little bit more customization to the back of the exhibit than you would otherwise get off of the 3D facades. Now, unlike the last time where we were building these big, vast, sort of decorative areas in the back of the habitats, we are not going to need to worry too much about that this time, as we are going to be covering a lot of the fronts over, as you will see very shortly. Now in the corner, I had this wide open space, and I didn't want to wrestle with these square cubes that the exhibits are. So we're just going to make a little diorama, a bit like we had originally in the very first video. But this time I wanted to try out the trick of using glass for water and have a bit more of a wider spanning setup. So we've started off with a variety of faux rocks, and then once we've got a couple of different colours down, I'm going to pop down some panes of glass as a pool of water. And then I'm going to go around and just hide the edges with more faux rocks and really fill out this area. I really just want to sort of decorate it up. Here, as you can see, we're also going to pop in a couple of the water effects just to really sell the illusion and add a little bit of ambient noise. With that all rocked out, we're going to add a couple of little plants, and we're also then going to go a little bit more with the, I guess, the indoor plants. So a lot of these in reality in a setup like this would just be completely plastic. They wouldn't be real plants. This being a somewhat nocturnal or night house, while you could have little grow lights above them, it's kind of a waste of time really. These plants are never going to flourish in this environment. So really we want to keep to just some very simple ferns and a couple of maybe colourful plants, as they just look incredibly fake even at the best of times. And then with that complete, we can start the wonderful transformation of covering over our exhibits. Now, I tried a couple of different types and ways of doing this, using planks, using sort of timber beams, kind of settled on these posts, and that gave me the most, I guess, authentic budget system that you'd often find in zoos in these type of setups. These are essentially just fence posts that are set at different heights, and we're going to use them to cover up the front of all of our habitats, just to hide it all away and give ourselves these little windows. And I did take a bit of time watching where the animals were going and making sure that we left little peepholes into those specific areas. And it does show in the end cinematics. You can always see one of the inhabitants of these exhibits as you go around. And yeah, I'm really pleased with how it all turned out. It just took a little bit of time, just getting them all in, getting them all at the right height. Very few repetitions. I didn't want to just copy and paste the little peepholes through. What you won't see on camera here is I also went on the ones that have like the little underground burrows and made sure they were all nice and visible from the outside. Then we're going to pop on a faux roof. This just brings that ceiling height down, makes it feel more closed in. Colour that black so we don't get any reflections off of it, fighting the enemy that is the Planet Zoo lighting system. And then we're just going to pop a couple more of those plants around on the walls just to break up some of the vertical pillars. Now for the education boards, we're going to use the little education stands, and using free build it allows me to rotate and hide them. So we're going to rotate them so the placards are the correct way up, and then we're going to sink them into each habitat as a little notice of what's in each peephole. We're going to add a couple of benches and a couple of trash cans, and with that the indoor section is complete and looking brilliant, I might add. Now, one of the big additions in this revamp is I wanted to break up a bit of that open space that was the plaza. And we're going to do that by adding a completely new animal. And I went around trying to work out what animal would work in a nocturnal house that was small enough to not take up too much space. And it came down to the kiwi versus the sandcat. As you can probably imagine, the sandcat won, and that's where we're starting. So we're going to make ourselves a little outdoor area. I know sandcats are meant to be nocturnal, but let's face it, in order to get some nice pretty pictures, we do need an outdoor area that they can run around in the sun in. So we're going to make ourselves a little outdoor area, as you can see here, with a dry moat going around the outside. We just took that into the ground and cladded it in some concrete. And then we're going to paint it all in sand and start building ourselves these little sandy dune hills. Now, all the way through building this, my original intention was that the keepers would never be able to get out to this outer area. So you'll notice that I don't put any enrichment items or anything that might involve a keeper needing access. Turns out that the doors are actually big enough. Who knew? That was by pure fluke. But the idea is that inside, in the nocturnal area of their den, that's where all their food items would be, etc. And then outdoors is just for when they want to come out and play. On the inside, we'll use some one-way glass. We're going to make this nice big viewing window into their habitat. What I noticed at various zoos was their nocturnal habitats have much larger viewing windows because normally it's incredibly difficult to see within them. So we're going to follow that idea and just line out some glass. We've put our wooden poles around the side, and that will give us these nice big windows. These windows also offer the opportunity to break up that feeling of having this wood paneling everywhere. We've still got a bit on there, but it also just sort of distracts your eyes. It gives you something nice and big to look at in a room that is full of very small things to look at. Now we're going to go full on thematic inside because this is an indoor nocturnal habitat. We're going to start off by covering the walls in rock, and we're going to make deliberately little ledges all the way around as well that the sandcats can jump and climb on. And then for planting, again, we're assuming some form of plastic or faux plants, but I suppose we could use grow lights in a habitat like this. But we're going to keep it fairly minimal. I don't want to hide the cats, they are fairly small. We're going to put that big bush in the middle though as a bit of a feature, and as you'll see very shortly, we're going to play with the lighting a little bit so that they have a bit of a scene around that tree. Also, the drain glass comes in clutch for this habitat, where we can add these little wisps of grass just poking out the sand. I thought that worked a lot more better than our old friend, the buffalo grass. Now, as I mentioned, playing around with the lighting in here, I've got 4 or 5 spotlights, all of which are red as per a normal nocturnal house. But we're also going to add in 1 moonlight spot, and we're going to shine a ray of moonlight into the middle of the habitat so that when you look in, you can see the cats playing around in this circular moonlight. The sandcats are not necessarily nocturnal purely because, unlike the kiwi, they're not really adapted. They're not going to have sore eyes if they're out in the day. However, they do that because of their habitat where they live is very, very warm during the day. Now, obviously, in the British countryside where Wildlands Zoo is set, that won't really be the case. So outside will always ironically be a little bit colder than their indoor habitat. Speaking of outside, I thought we might as well give them somewhere to bask in the very limited sunshine that they get. So we're going to make ourselves a, again, very zoo appropriate climbing frame, just using the climbing pieces and some rope to tie it to the ground. Off camera, I go back and add some LED caps here to make little ground hooks that hold it in, and the cats can run up and down these to get on and off of the climbing frame. I also hid a enrichment item in the middle of the platform there to make sure that they come up to it. Now, when we look at planting out here, again, I want to keep it quite sparse. However, most British houses are currently holding at least 1 aloe vera plant, and normally that's been given by a family member who has the problem that their aloe vera plant won't stop creating more plants. And in my office here, I've got 3. But you could probably call one about 20 given the amount of babies it's got. That's a long way round of me just saying I'm going to put some aloe vera plants out there because they'll be fine in this climate. And we're going to bring back some of that grass. Again, I want to make like a little grassy, sandy area. A couple of shrubs, a couple of bits of grass. And then I wanted a statement tree just to add a bit to the silhouette, and I really like how that turned out. I'm also going to use the tops of the Troider grass just to give us a little bit of weeds, a little bit of a grass, sort of longer grass stem, and I think that turned out really well. Habitat done, we're going to move on and just get our patio put down, and with that complete, we can move on to our butterfly house. So this is almost part 2 of the video. And we're going to start off again by lifting the roof. As you can see, I've removed all of the previous habitats that were in here. And we're just going to run a path vaguely in the right shape. This is very much based on the butterfly house at Chester Zoo, which I absolutely adored because it is essentially just a giant greenhouse. There's no fancy building for this. It is just what it is. So we're going to run a path around. And then in the middle, I'm going to make a little pond stream. It's not quite big enough to be a pond, but essentially a little running bit of water. And we're going to have those 2 different elevations there. And then over that, we're going to have a nice big bridge. With that done, we can start placing down our more structural elements. So we're going to have a couple more exhibits running down one side, and then along the back of those, we're going to run our staff path. As you'll see later, this will become a building, and then through the back of the exhibit, you'll be able to see the staff walking in the backstage areas. Out the front, we're going to create ourselves a double door, a little double airlock with our PVC curtains. And then I'm also going to just reuse the sliding glass doors that we made in a couple of previous episodes ago, just so that you've got somewhere that you can lock off at night and stop people just being able to wander straight in. Now, just to level these up, we're going to run some fence posts along the top, and these will just hold onto that glass and give it a little bit more of a framework. And then off camera, I'll pop a roof on. Now, similarly, over the top of our exhibits and backstage area, we're going to use this nondescript corrugated plastic roof. And the idea being is you're meant to look at the glass, you're not meant to look at the backstage roofing area. So we'll get all that housed in, and with that done, we can start bringing down our big glass roof and making sure it's seated back on top of the wall nice and happily. Now, before we can start on the inside, we need to make a couple of modifications to the walls. And we're going to delete a good chunk of them away, give them a little stone plinth at the bottom made out of the same painted bricks that we had there before, and then we'll fill those with glass. Once we've got the glass all on the outside of the building, we're then just going to run along the outside of those and add in some netting. These can be rolled up, rolled down, just to provide a bit of shade. It is, after all, a warm tropical house. I have also put them around the sunshades at the top, just to make sure that no butterflies can escape. Moving on just back to the outside before we start decorating inside, the little planters that we've got left here, I'm actually just stealing the plants that we had on our previous planted little pathway areas that were originally on this plaza. So rather than buying them again, I'm just jumping over to the group that we've got over the top of our little construction fence there, and just bringing the plants over and replanting them in, just to fill it out a bit and add a bit of sight line that's a little bit nicer. Oh boy, halfway through, we're getting there, we are getting there, and I've not yet lost my voice. These longer videos, I tell you. So, we're moving inside now. I'm going to start off by putting down our structural rocks, and as part of that, we're going to make ourselves a little raised rock area here. This does two things. It blocks the sight line for people as they walk in, so the room's going to feel bigger, but also it gives us a source for our water. And we're going to use a little bit of a trick that I've only just sort of come onto. I never like putting really big contrasting rocks in. However, I've noticed that if you just take the same set of rocks like we're doing with these faux rock pebbles and just put them everywhere, they stop looking repetitive after a while. Now, I did that and I added a couple of extra colours in, but realistically this whole pebble stream is made from probably 3 different faux rocks, and that's about it. And it looks chaotic enough that you can't really tell that it's all the same stuff. With the river done, we're going to jump onto the bridge. This was a lesson in tedium that I'm not going to make you watch through. Essentially, I'm going to cover the entire path in this stained timber. We're going to turn it brown, and then we're going to make some posts out of some stained timber poles and make them brown. And then we're going to make a fence between those posts out of some stained timber thin poles, and we're going to make them brown. That's pretty much it. It's a fairly simple bridge. Now, with that all done, we're going to move on to possibly one of my favourite little pointless accessories of this entire build, and that is the radiators. This being a tropical house, especially in the UK, it needs some radiators, and these are absolutely directly inspired by the Chester Zoo ones. I'm going to pop a picture up on screen for that, and as you can see, this was my aim, and I think it turned out quite well. We're going to use these plant pots here to make the sort of radiator heat, I don't know what you call them, discs. And then we're going to use some gutters to make the heat poles that go in and out of the main radiator. And with those done, we're also just going to pop them around the whole building. What you won't see in the video here, which is a bit of annoyance now I'm editing it, is I actually put a little valve on each pole. So it looked like a little turn on, turn off valve, but it's so small you can't really see it unless you go right up to it. You'll have to have a look when I put it on the workshop. Now, with the radiators done, we're going to move on to cladding our back wall, and I wanted this to follow the same idea as our insect house, but we're not going to use the same materials. Instead, we're going to use the Australian wood planks. These have this lovely warm oak texture, and I really like them, really like them. So what we're going to do is we're going to make ourselves a little template of probably 5 or 6 planks in a row, just at different heights. And then we're going to copy them and use them everywhere. And we're going to run it all the way down this wall just to clad it in and surround our exhibits. We're also going to run it along the bottom, and it's just going to do that effect of minimizing how big these giant glass boxes really look and really settles them into the wall. We're going to bring back the rotated education sign, forgot what it was, and we're going to pop that in the bottom corner of each habitat so that we can see what is inside. And these are mostly going to carry things like frogs and spiders and insects. I guess the other one's insect as well. Now, just to add a little bit of detailing, we're going to make a very fine mesh to sit on the front, and we're going to use the square mesh just to do that, just by replicating that and nudging it across, and then we're going to bring it across the front of each one. And again, this just forms a nice little interesting detail to the front of the exhibit. Now, as we move into planting, and I promise you for once this planting is actually enjoyable, I think it's probably time just to point out that if you've got this far and you feel like you've had a little bit of value from this video, feel free to click the like button down below. If you've not subscribed, make sure you subscribe, and don't forget to leave a comment in the comments for the sake of engagement. Oh, you thought I'd forgot. I didn't forget. I just put it in the middle. Now, planting. The reason I like planting in here is because normally we're following a scheme. With this room, we're not. We're just putting down whatever looked good. So we've got a load of this coastal pig face everywhere. We've got some nice tropical plants. We've got some temperate plants. And the aim was to make it feel really, really jungly. And I love how it turned out. I absolutely adore how it turned out. This thing gives me brain tingles, and it's amazing. I mean, I'm tooting my own horn here, but you know what? I think this one deserves it. So as you can see, as we're going around and popping them in, we're just going to fill it up with green. And I also made a couple of little custom feeders. These won't actually work with the butterflies, but they're something that I saw at Chester Zoo, where they just had these logs covered in fruit. Unfortunately, the only cut up fruit that we have in game is the watermelon, and I didn't really want to put in a 1,000 item piece object of a orange made from multiple different bits of scenery. I know they're out there. I've seen them. We're not using them. We're also going to place down some more of the exhibit boards. These work great as little stands for the education sort of animal plaques, and we're going to dot them all the way around the path. So the idea is you're going round, you're seeing different animals, and then there's these little snippets of information as you walk by. We're also going to repurpose. So you remember on the plaza we had all these plants in pots just dotted around. I didn't want to get rid of them, so instead I'm just going to bring them inside, and we're going to pop them around the path and sort of snuffle them in between some of the other plants. And I like it. I like the idea of just having this random plant growing out of a pot in amongst all these other plants that are growing out the ground. Now, to finish us off, I'm going to run some liana vines along the ceiling. This took far, far longer than I ever imagined it would. Essentially, they are all hooked around the poles that line the ceiling, and the effect was worth it, but it was a challenge to make sure that we got them all in. And last but not least, I cobbled together a couple of kitchen cabinets, and we're going to pop them in the area behind those exhibits that as you look through, you can sort of see this backstage kitchen. We've got floor cabinets, we've got wall cabinets, and we also decorated them up. So we've also popped down a couple of cups and some clipboards. Now these don't need to be too detailed, you're not really going to see too much of them. But then just as staff are wandering by and you look through the exhibit into the back area, you'll just see this kitchen that they clearly use just to prepare the food and get everything all ready for the animals. It's a nice little addition, and I really like how it turned out. And with that, let's head into some of the best cinematics I think we have done all of Wildlands. This whole renovation was absolutely worth it, and this transformation of these two buildings, I mean, I'm happy with it, as you can probably guess. I'm going to leave you with some actual longer cinematics this time, just because we've done a lot. We've put a lot in, and we have built a lot. So I know you guys don't normally stick around for the full cinematics. I would absolutely implore you to, but if you enjoyed today, as I mentioned earlier, please do not forget to tippy tap the like button. If you're not subscribed, subscribe now, and I will see you next time, which I think is going to be the start of season 2. Exciting. Goodbye.
thina sizowakha. Thina nisibona silapha sizowakha. Nisibona silapha thina sizowakha. Thina nisibona silapha sizowakha. Nisibona silapha thina sizowakha. Nisibona silapha thina sizowakha.